My name is Kaylee Reese, and I will be doing my term project on the personality of Rodion Romanovich Raskolnikov from the novel Crime and Punishment. Rodion Romanovich Raskolnikov is the troubled and complex protagonist of Fyodor Dostoevsky's 1866 novel Crime and Punishment. A former law student who lives in the poverty-ridden streets of St. Petersburg, Russia, Raskolnikov is intelligent, proud, and deeply philosophical. Haunted by existential questions and a theory that extraordinary individuals can transcend moral boundaries, he commits a brutal double murder of a local pawnbroker, Alyona Ivanova, and her sister, Lizaveta, believing it to be justified and that he is doing it for the greater good of his community. However, his intellectual justifications quickly unravel as he becomes consumed by guilt, paranoia, and psychological torment. To analyze Raskolnikov's personality, I will be using three aspects of personality. The first is neuroticism, a trait that is associated with the ineffective means of dealing with problems. This trait will be analyzed with the psychoanalytic method. The second is narcissism, a personality trait that is associated with high self-regard and a pattern of extroverted and confident behavior, which will be analyzed through the motive perspective. And the final personality trait is malignant narcissism, a severe pathological form of narcissism that is characterized by a pervasive pattern of antisocial behavior, manipulativeness, aggression, and paranoia, which will be analyzed with the perspective of Erich Fromm. The first aspect I will be analyzing is neuroticism. Throughout Crime and Punishment, it is shown that Raskolnikov is a highly neurotic individual. His neuroticism is demonstrated by his obsessive thinking, extreme mood swings, and paranoia, and a constant state of internal conflict. Despite the intellectual attempts he uses to detach from the emotional weight of his crime, such as his idea of the extraordinary man, his psyche quickly begins to deteriorate. He becomes feverish, irrational, and increasingly paranoid. Throughout the novel, Raskolnikov exhibits compulsive behaviors such as returning to the crime scene, engaging in ambiguous conversations about morality, and isolating himself from those who care about him. His erratic actions and inability to find peace reflect a mind of constant turmoil. To analyze his neuroticism, I will be using the psychoanalytic method. Raskolnikov's id is most clearly seen in his impulsive actions and his violent tendencies. His initial decision of murder is driven by selfishness, a desire for power, and a belief that his extraordinary intellect gives him the right to break moral laws. The id operates according to the pleasure principle and seeks immediate gratification. In Raskolnikov's case, the murder serves as an outlet for his deep-seated resentment towards the injustices of society and his own poverty, fulfilling a distorted need for control over his circumstances. Raskolnikov's superego plays a significant role in his neuroticism. His guilt and torment after the murder stem from the tension between his actions and his moral beliefs. While he initially rationalizes the crime through the lens of his theory, the extraordinary man, this defense mechanism fails to suppress his superego. The superego, which embodies societal norms and personal ethics, constantly reminds him that his crime is morally wrong. This clash is evident in his compulsive behavior and mental breakdown. The ego mediates between the desires of the id and the constraints of the superego. Raskolnikov's ego is weak and often paralyzed, unable to find a balance between the impulsive urges of the id and the moral reprimands of the superego. Raskolnikov's inability to confront the consequences of his crime reflects a breakdown in his ego's ability to function effectively. Raskolnikov's neuroticism stems from the intense conflict between the three components of his psyche. His id urges him toward action, his superego demands guilt and punishment, and his ego is incapable of mediating these forces. This results in extreme psychological distress and a descent into mental illness. The second personality trait I will be analyzing is narcissism. Raskolnikov's character is deeply marked by narcissistic traits, which contribute to his intellectual arrogance, self-centered worldview, and internal turmoil. Narcissism involves an inflated sense of self-importance, a desire for admiration, and a lack of empathy for others. One of the most noticeable aspects of Raskolnikov's narcissism is his belief in his own exceptionalities. He sees himself as an extraordinary individual, distinct from ordinary people, and as a result believes that he is entitled to transcend moral and ethical laws, which is illustrated by his justification for the murder of Alyona Ivanovna and her sister. Raskolnikov believes that because of his intellectual superiority and the potential he sees in himself to contribute to society, he has the right to kill the pawnbroker, a seemingly insignificant individual. His theory of the extraordinary man, which asserts that certain individuals have the power to make decisions beyond conventional morality, further strengthens the sense of his grandiosity. Raskolnikov's narcissism is also evident in his behavior toward others. He isolates himself from those who care about him, such as his mother and sister, and dismisses their concerns as inferior or unimportant. He maintains a sense of emotional distance from both his friends and family despite their love for him. This lack of empathy and his tendency to prioritize his own suffering or intellectual pursuits also often pursuits over the well-being of others point to his narcissistic personality. I will be using the motive perspective to analyze Raskolnikov's narcissism. Raskolnikov's narcissism is shaped by his psychological needs for power, achievement, and affiliation, which drive his actions and attitudes throughout the novel. Raskolnikov's desire for power is evident in his belief that he is above the societal rules and moral constraints. He views himself as an extraordinary man, someone who can exert control over the lives of others to achieve his own ends. His crime serves as an attempt to demonstrate that he can wield power over life and death. This is tied to his inflated self-image, as he believes that people like himself should be able to bend and break moral laws without consequence. Raskolnikov is driven by a need for personal success and recognition. His theory of the extraordinary man reflects his belief that he can achieve greatness through exceptional intellect and action, regardless of moral and ethical boundaries. The murder is not merely about material gain, but about proving to himself and others that he is capable of transcending ordinary limits and achieving greatness. While Raskolnikov largely isolates himself, his narcissism also manifests in his struggle with his need for affiliation. He rejects the love and support of those around him, like his family and Sonia, believing they are beneath him. His emotional detachment and constant self-absorption prevent him from forming genuine connections. The third personality trait I will be analyzing is malignant narcissism. Rodion Raskolnikov exhibits characteristics of malignant narcissism, a more extreme and destructive form of narcissism. At the core of malignant narcissism is an inflated sense of superiority. Raskolnikov's belief in his own exceptionalism is evident when he justifies the brutal murder of the pawnbroker. As an extraordinary man, he believes himself to be entitled to break societal laws in pursuit of his personal goals. His theory, which argues that certain individuals, like Napoleon, are above morality, reflects his grandiose self-image. He believes that his intelligence and potential give him the right to manipulate, control, and even destroy others for what he perceives as the greater good. Malignant narcissism can also be seen in Raskolnikov's lack of empathy and disregard for others' suffering. Throughout the novel, he exhibits a callousness toward those who care for him, including his family and Sonia. He isolates himself, refusing to accept help or emotional support. When he does engage with others, it is often with a sense of superiority or condescension, showing little regard for their emotional well-being. Additionally, Raskolnikov's tendencies toward aggression and self-sabotage reveal a darker side of his narcissism. His mental and emotional breakdowns, erratic behavior, and his ultimate inability to face his crime demonstrate the destructive consequences of his inflated self-image. His inability to feel genuine remorse or empathy for his victims further exemplifies malignant narcissism's harmful effects. From Erich Fromm's perspective, malignant narcissism in Raskolnikov can be understood as a combination of grandiosity, self-centeredness, and moral conflict. Another crucial aspect of his malignant narcissism is his moral hypochondriasis. which Fromm describes as a heightened obsession with morality, guilt, and a sense of moral failure. Raskolnikov's grandiosity is evident in his belief that he is an extraordinary man, above the common moral constraints. He justifies murder through his theory that individuals like himself, who have the intellect and potential for greatness, should be allowed to transcend conventional morality. His sense of superiority, however, is fragile and constantly challenged by internal conflict. This mirrors Fromm's concept of narcissism. Outward confidence and self-importance mask deep insecurities and emotional distress. Raskolnikov's moral hypochondriasis plays a crucial role in his psychological unraveling. He is overwhelmed by a constant fear of inadequacy and guilt. Despite rationalizing his crime intellectually, he cannot escape the psychological torment that comes with it. His exaggerated focus on his moral shortcomings, which Fromm describes as moral hypochondriasis, causes him to repeatedly doubt his worth and actions. This leads him to an obsessive need for self-punishment, often distancing himself from others, especially those who offer support like Sonia. His self-inflicted suffering stems from this extreme moral self-consciousness, which amplifies his inner turmoil. In conclusion, throughout the novel, Raskolnikov clearly demonstrates the personality traits of neuroticism, narcissism, and malignant narcissism. This is shown through his intense levels of paranoia due to the conflicting mechanisms of his id and superego, the high regard that he has for himself and that he is an extraordinary man that is above the law, and tendencies towards self-sabotage, which lead to his mental and emotional breakdown and eventually his arrest. Thank you for listening to my presentation on Rodion Raskolnikov.